Welcome to the Pastor Study here on Smooth 88.1 WHOV iHeartRadio. Right here, y'all, Facebook Live. This is the first show of the year. And wouldn't you know it, in true Pastor Study fashion, we ain't got everybody on the show. But that's all right, though. We got most of the people on the crew. Commonwealth Attorney of the City of Hampton, Anton Bell, is with us. Happy New Year, sir.
Happy New Year's.
Dr. Alvian Lyons, doctor, because she got two of them things. Happy New Year to you, ma'am. We got Bishop Ray Johnson to me in Outreach. Happy New Year to you, sir.
Happy New Year, everybody. Happy New Year.
We got producer extraordinaire Jason Covington in the house. Happy New Year to you, sir.
God bless
and
you,
then,
man. God bless you.
And then one who's off handling her business, Delegate Marcia Price of the 95th. And so we wish her well as she's traveling and taking care of her responsibilities. And while we're starting off on a happy note, because we're glad to be in another year and to do this show, unfortunately, the show topic is one that is not too happy to talk about. It is unprecedented, to say the least. And for those who know, this didn't happen in some place in America. This happened right here in our own backyard. And we're talking about the 6-year-old student at Richneck Elementary School in Newport News that last week went into the school and shot his teacher. And so, so many angles, so much outrage, so many places to discuss. But before we get into all that, we want to put some facts behind this conversation. So again, there was a 6-year-old student who brought a gun to school. It was a 9mm Tarsus gun that he obtained from his mother. And from what we understand, put it in his backpack. And all of the information that we're sharing came from a press conference by Chief Steve Drew, Newport News Police Chief, and Dr. George Parker, school superintendent. So he obtained the gun from his mother, put the gun in his backpack, brought the gun to school, and at a certain period of time during school, while instruction was going on, he took the gun out and fired one shot. The bullet went through the teacher's hand and lodged into her chest. At that point, she instructed all of the students in the class, which ranged from about 16 to 20 students, to leave the classroom. And they immediately left the classroom, went into another classroom. Then another female educator went into the classroom, and it was the teacher and the student that was still left in the classroom alone. The other female educator that went in began to restrain the student until the other officers or SRO were able to go in. They went in, got the young student, took him out of the classroom without incident. But there was an altercation with the student and the female educator that went in to try to restrain him. He hit her. And so the student now is in some sort of rehabilitation program, and it is still up in the air about what's going to happen next. So much to uncover here in this situation. It is unprecedented, as Dr. Parker said, only the third time in 50 years that someone this young has committed this. So, Alvin, I want to start with you. You're a mom. From a parent perspective, because there's so many ways that we can look at this. As a parent perspective, what went through your mind hearing this story?
I mean, you first, you want to believe that somehow the information that you're hearing is wrong, right? Like that this was some accident, that a child might have gotten their hands on a gun and it accidentally discharged and harmed someone. The last thing you want to believe is that it could be thoughtfully planned out by a 6-year-old. Then you are imagining what your kids were like at 6 years old. I mean, mine were freaking watching Barney, like there was nothing about the way that they lived their lives that I could even fathom going from them not being able to decide between peanut butter and jelly and a cheese sandwich to, them planning to kill their teacher. I mean, just, it would never even cross my mind that that would be the case. And I was a school counselor for years before I owned my corporation. So, and, in your internships prior to becoming a school counselor, you work at every level, K through 12, because in the state of Virginia, you get a K through 12 certification in order to be able to support kids inside of the school system. So I've worked at every level. And half of the reason educators choose to work with small children sometimes is to avoid the kind of craziness that happens at the middle school and high school level. You don't even anticipate for 2 seconds that you would have to defend yourself against your own student. As a matter of fact, Dr. Parker talked about in the press conference that they've done active shooter drills, and every teacher and student knows what they're supposed to do, because you are always planning for that assault to come from the outside. It had never been a time that they were planning for that assault from the inside at an elementary school level. So there is just a lot of incongruence. There's a lot of conflict, emotionally, mentally, psychologically, spiritually, trying to wrap your mind around the idea that a 6-year-old, teeny little tender age child could intentionally and thoughtfully plan to harm their teacher the way that that actually transpired. So, I mean, it's you literally are with what it is that you're hearing, and just constantly hoping that somehow the evidence will point to an accident in some way.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that we certainly recognize the teacher. She is 25 years old. Her name is Abigail Zwerner. And at the time of the shooting, she was in critical condition. Thank God her condition has been upgraded to stable. And so she is recovering and doing better. But we wanted to make sure we called her name, because there was a lot of heroic acts that she did even after being shot, making sure that the other students got out of the room, were safe. And so we certainly want to recognize her. Jason, I want to come to you next, man, because maybe what the audience doesn't realize on the Pastor Study is not only do you do ministry, but you recently became employed in the school system as an elementary school counselor. And so you, more than anybody else on the show, perhaps can give us some context into this, because you work with elementary school kids every day. So for us who are on the outside, most of us are trying to process how in the world could an elementary student, a 6-year-old, as Alvian said, be that thoughtful and intentional and bringing a gun to school, taking it from home, bringing it to school, and actually going through with using it against their teacher. But maybe there's some things that we don't know about the public, man, about how elementary kids are today, the exposure to violence. Kind of shed some light to us, man, on what you see on a daily basis in working with elementary kids.
Well, I'll tell you that working where I work is not like when I was at Aberdeen Elementary back in the late 80s, early 90s. These kids are a different breed. Like what Dr. Alvin Lyons' doctor said, when I originally was offered my position, I was like, I want to be with the older kids, 6 through 8. Then I got into the building. I said, I don't want to go with these older kids. Let me stay with these babies, because if something does pop off, I'm bigger, I could take care of it, but not in a million years. Like when I got the call, my wife actually called me and said, hey, are you good? And she told me what happened. And I'm thinking, I deal with pre-K through 2. So I'm thinking about my little 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds, and everything is kind of coming to the fruition to hearing some of the things they say. Because these kids, because of what they're exposed to, they're quick to say, I'm going to kill you, or I'm going to get you. I'm going to do da-da-dee-da-da-do. And you look at them like, they're not going to really do that. I'm good. Even if they do it, I'm big enough, I'm quick enough. But in the moment, when you got 16, 17, in some cases, a lot of these classes, like that school was blessed because they had a smaller class. But some of the classes I deal with, it's 25, 30 kids in the classroom. One of these kids decide they want to do something. Not only do you have to have a wherewithal to keep yourself safe, but you're tasked to make sure these other kids are safe. And that's difficult. And I don't think people take into account the heroics that Miss Abby did in the moment being shot, and in the moment being shot, getting all those kids to safety. And then when the other educator came in, this kid was still on 10 and hit that other educator. So I don't think people give people in education the respect they need to. And even before I came into the position I'm in now, I was 3-4 years as the ED counselor at a Hampton City School, and those kids from 6 to 8, like the spectrum of where they were intellectually, what they saw culturally, and this is back in the early 2000s. You fast forward 10, 15 years, and then all they're seeing is gore. I had to even have, when I was in a session with a young man, I had to explain to him there are no reset buttons in life. Once you do it, you're done. If you come and you use a weapon and you kill somebody or you threaten somebody, like, you're done. But that, I think what happened last week changed how educators, administrators, and dare I say, how the school boards and everything downtown, they look at these threats. Because no more you can say, if someone say, hey, I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z, oh, they're not gonna do it. You have to take every threat as if it's really gonna happen, because at this school of Newport News, nobody knew. Let's just think about this. My son is 3. He's in pre-K. A kid that was just 3 years older than him I own legally a G2 Taurus 9mm. I go shooting at the fire range often. The recoil on that joint is massive for me, and I'm 39, 2 pounds. This little boy was maybe, just imagine a 6-year-old. They're small. To pick it up and to aim it, let's talk about what center mass. He didn't aim at her feet. Well, if he did, but the bullet went here. That's my question is, what goes on with a child's mind to not just say, I'm going to kill you, but go get the tools of destruction to go and do it. And you in education, you like that moment when she was confronted with that weapon, it's like, I mean, did he say this stuff before? Were there any other warning signs? These are the kind of things you think about. So when I'm in the building, I tell the kids, don't walk behind Mr. Governor. Y'all walk in front of me. I got to see what y'all doing, what y'all think about, your demeanor, your disposition. Because at any time, if these kids, and because they're so small, you don't want to hurt them. So you can't just be grabbing on them. So it's so many things that I commend her, because I don't know what I would have done in that situation.
Yeah, and I want to just piggyback on that real quick. So is it safe to say that on a daily basis, there are a lot of educators that are threatened by kids?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was threatened today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so with that
all the time in the schools.
Right. And so now, Alvin and Jason, the question becomes, how do we going forward? How are we to process these threats? Because if teachers and educators are hearing threats every day, I think before this happened, people may have felt like, yeah, whatever. But now you got to take these things seriously because of the potential for it to actually happen, right? So do you think now that threats of students do you think school board or schools will now take threats differently or more seriously than before?
Oh, I certainly think so.
Yeah, you have to. You have to. And Dr. Alvin Lyon, doctor can attest to this. Even Anton Bell, when things happen, you got to document. When these kids say they're going to do something to me, I got my little black book on such and such date, such a time, and this was the location. They said this, because if it's not documented, it didn't happen. Because oftentimes, a lot of times, these interactions, you're one-on-one with these kids. They are, you got cameras, but they're not right on you. So as a professional, I document. I let my my administration know, and then like you say now, those things can't be swept under the rug because this boy was 6. If I would have heard it was an 11-year-old, 12, 13-year-old, that's a little more fathom. But a 6-year-old,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
If you're just tuning in, we're talking about the tragic incident that took place at Richneck Elementary School. 6-year-old student went in the classroom and shot his teacher, 25-year-old Abigail Zwerner. And so we are definitely praying for her recovery. She has been upgraded to stable condition. Drop your comments on our Facebook page, Pastor Study. Let us know what you think about this whole situation. So many questions, so many different perspectives. Commonwealth Attorney Bell, we got to come to you, man, from a legal perspective in all of this. When you heard the news, put your Commonwealth Attorney hat on. When you first heard the news about this, what went through your mind?
Why is everybody shocked? That was the first thing that went through my mind. Why is everybody shocked? Students have been preying on some of these teachers, administrators, as well as students for years. And a lot of stuff has been swept under the rug. A lot of stuff, and this is not just Newport News. I'm talking about if you go to any urban center, because this could happen in any city. So let's make that very, very clear. This incident right here could have happened in any city. If you talk to any teacher who's been teaching for a minute, they will tell you they've been threatened by a student. They will tell you they've been hit by a student. Some of them will tell you they've been spat on by students. They would tell you of the horror stories that they have seen on a daily basis. Many of them will express to you the frustration that they feel from not being heard by what they feel is the administration taking the side of the parent and the student versus listening to their concerns. And many of them would have gone to administrators and said, hey, this is what's going on. And they would have been told, look, you need to just, gird yourself up or stop being sensitive, or you need to have thicker skin. This happens on a regular basis. I can't even tell you how many cases we prosecute on a regular basis because students have struck another student or have struck an administrator or a teacher. It happens on a regular basis. So the first thing that went through my mind is, why is everybody shocked? And the second part that went through my mind is Columbine happened back in 1999. Everybody was all up in arms. This can never happen again. We're not going. We have to put things into place to make sure this can never happen again. Fast forward some 23 years later, 24 years later, it come April, and if you look at the history of school shootings, you look at the history of school massacres, there have been too many to even name. Can't even count them. There have been hundreds of them. And so as a result of that, my thing is, this is just the tip of the iceberg. If we don't get a hold of this situation concerning getting into the homes and finding out the root issues of some of these problems with these kids before they bring them into the streets, whether it be at school, whether it be in the court system, whether it be in the neighborhood, if we don't get into the homes, you're going to have a repeat offense. I'm telling you right now, you heard it here. You're going to have a repeat offense because it's already happening. People are just shocked because the kid was 6. But like I said, I'm not shocked. And I'm still wondering why everybody's so shocked. But again, I think everybody doesn't know that this is going on a regular basis.
Well, I think you just said it. I think the shock isn't that it happened, because there are lots of videos, unfortunately, that's out there on social media. But usually it's an older student that is doing something like this. I think the shock is, how could a 6-year-old have the wherewithal to take a gun from the home, put it in the backpack, and then, like Jason said, use, right. I know you say because you see it on a daily basis, Tom, but most of us don't.
Not just that. Think about it. I want y'all to think about it. If you go on social media right now, what is the most prevalent type of trending item going on among our kids? It's fight videos. They watch fight videos on a regular basis. And these are not just people just fighting each other and just wrestling around like we did back in the day. These are people that are knocking each other out. These are people that are brutalized. I mean, the person falls to the ground and they're stomping them in their head, where they're literally knocking them out. People are probably having concussions and things of that nature. That is what our kids are growing up watching on a regular basis. It's not just the videos where the people are shooting up everybody in these games where you can't hit the reset button. It's also the reality of watching these fights every day, and
Yeah.
it gets into your mind. And then God knows what you're watching at home between your parents, if both parents are even there, between your older siblings. And so you are faced with trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. And then God forbid if somebody tell you, you just like your daddy, you trifling, you no good, you never amount to anything. And so you're watching trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. So how can you have a 6-year-old that feels comfortable enough to grab a gun, to be able to take that gun and put it in their backpack, go to school, and then shoot the teacher and then fight the other teacher because you holding me back because I just shot this teacher, and you didn't even think about the fact that you shot the teacher. You mad because they're holding you back. You have no regret. You have no remorse. And I asked my 14-year-old this. I said, would you feel comfortable using a gun at your age? And he said, well, I guess if I practice with the gun, if I've been around a gun enough and I've been around live targets, then I guess I would feel comfortable. But outside of being around live targets or practicing or handling a gun on a regular basis, no, I guess I wouldn't feel comfortable around a gun. Now, ask yourself this question. Why does a 6-year-old feel comfortable around a gun? How is a 6-year-old able to use a gun accurately and shoot somebody center mass? Please answer that question, and then I'll tell you your answer.
Yeah. And listen, you know, that's a question that's out there for many people. And before I get to Bishop, because I want to stick to the legal part, because Taryn, there are a lot of people that got legal questions in this. And one of the legal questions that many people have is, how do you begin? What do you do legally with a 6-year-old?
Nothing.
Like what
I just
happens?
told you, nothing. You see, I'm not going to make it all complicated for you. I'm going to make it very simplistic. Nothing. Why? Because a 6-year-old is not going to be competent enough to even be able to stand trial. They're not going to be able to understand the charges that are being brought against them. They're not going to be able to understand the court system. You got to be able to understand all of that, the nature of your charges, the court system, how much time you could potentially get. They got to be able to understand all of that in order to be able to be competent to even stand trial. If you can't even get to that part right there, then everything else is irrelevant, because you can't even put the case on. You can't even try the case. So he'll now be found competent at that age. And the truth of the matter is, you don't know if he'll ever be found competent, because we don't know his mental health background. We don't know if there's some psychosis going on. We don't know any of these things. And so as a result of that, nothing. I had a 9-year-old when I was a young prosecutor who had sexually assaulted his younger cousins. I mean, and this dude had some psychosis going on with him. He took a shoe and took the heavy part of the shoe, and he beat the 4-year-old in the head to the point where the 4-year-old was urinating blood, had to be rushed to the emergency room, and did all types of things to them. And I, as a baby prosecutor, had to prosecute this case. Of course, they found him incompetent to stand trial. And his mom was on her way to Germany because she was in the military. And so she was getting deployed. The judge said, I'm sending him with his mom because I can't keep him here, because we don't know if we'll ever be able to restore him. And I sat in that courtroom almost in tears, because all I felt was, he is a predator on the loose, and he is certainly going to do this again wherever he goes. And those poor babies that just got traumatized, God knows what's going to happen in their lives. And he was 9. He was 9.
So Tom, right now we know that the young boy is in police custody or somewhere being evaluated. We know that at some point that evaluation period has to end. Are you saying today that once that is over, that he gets to go back home and then that's it. He gets to move on with his life.
I don't know where they're going to take him, because the truth of the matter is clearly his mom couldn't control him. So I doubt very seriously he's going to be able to go back home. However, the question is whether he'll be charged. I doubt that. Very likely, very unlikely, he will be charged. So if that's your question, very unlikely he's going to be charged, because you're not going to get past competency. I don't see how you're going to get past that threshold.
Okay. So then if he doesn't get charged, then a lot of people are saying, do you hold the parents accountable for this because he somehow was able to get access to the gun and get it to school? And so if the child is too young to stand trial, then maybe the parents, in our society, somebody has to be held liable or responsible. What do you say to that for people who say if the kid can't be held accountable, then the parent should?
Well, a parent can be held accountable if the parent had that firearm in a location that was accessible to that child, and that parent did not use due diligence to make sure that that firearm was not accessible to that child. So if they were negligent in some way of having that gun in the home where that 6-year-old could easily access that firearm, then yes, that parent could be charged with something like maybe child neglect or child abuse or something of that nature. But here's the problem. Based upon the media, they're saying that the parent says she locked the gun up and that the gun was placed somewhere where the kid had to climb to get to the gun. And then there was a key that clearly wasn't with the gun. And so he had to find the gun. They had to find the key and then climb to unlock it. So we don't know we don't know what type of conditions existed concerning the location of this gun and what means this parent went through to try to keep this gun away from this child. But again, it's going to all come out eventually, because I'm sure the police are looking at all the different factors. I understand that she's cooperating. The mom is cooperating with the police. And so it's going to all come out. But here's the thing. If she really used some due diligence to put that gun away, and this kid was just adamant, and he was able to find the key somehow, and then climb however high he had to climb to get to this gun, it's going to be really hard to prove that this parent was negligent. And if that's the case, you don't have anybody charged in this case.
Right.
Bishop, this past Sunday, I had an altar full of educators who were weeping, heartbroken over this incident, because many of them were fearful of their life going back to work.
Yeah.
It should not be that educators are scared to death that something violent is going to happen. What we know to be true, sadly, and Anton said it best, this could happen in anywhere in America, but the reality is, in the last, I think Alvin said, 17 months or 18 months in the city of Newport News, there have been 3 shootings.
Correct.
One of which was inside the school at Heritage, one of which was at a sporting event where a student was killed at Mitchville, and then this one here. Ton said that this is more of a family dynamic. This is we can talk about school, we can talk, but there's something going on in our homes, the exposure in our homes, the violence that some of our kids are seeing on a daily basis. Time out, Bishop, for just prayer vigils and all of that, because at the end of the day, man, people saying thoughts and prayers, but this stuff keeps happening.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be something else beyond just the same old, same old. And by the way, in 2022, there was 60 school shootings across the country. What do we say to this, Bishop?
It's going to take community collaborative, along with clergy, the church, and legislators working together, each one in their lane in concert. typically what we do is each individual grouping does their piece without coordination and communication with the other. In this kind of scenario, it's going to require that the school board is in concert with the state legislatures, who are in concert with city council, who is in concert with clergy, who is in concert with community. And some of those meetings, as clergy, we may need to host them so that people can communicate and say the things that need to be said, so that proper legislation can be developed, something with teeth in it, that can restrict this kind of activity from happening, that allows for some freedom to take place, to give some power back to parents to be able to create environments where there is instruction, structure, discipline, and love given to children, so that they can grow up in environments with a value system. When I first heard about this, and the reason I land the plane right there is because first thing I did when I heard about this, I had just came out of my sanctuary, or our sanctuary, from praying during this season of consecration and fasting. I went back to the sanctuary and fell on my face. And the first thing for me was, Lord, this cannot be happening. One. So Ton, I got a little pushback a little bit, only because the age of innocence, which we know comes from the scripture, is about age 12 or 11. So like he said, child can't even be processed competently to understand what is happening. Here is what struck me, Pastor Swan. The innocence of this child has been so far removed from a sense of consciousness that there is no remorse within him, because something is going on around him or her that is pushing these children a little bit beyond desensitization from the video games that they watch, the TikTok videos that they see, the world star stuff that's going on. And I'm just gonna come straight out with it like this. Somebody somewhere, something has left the gate open. And this is a spiritual issue, to where we are losing a sense of value, where we are sensitive about life. Then on Alvion's side, this is beyond conflict management and how you process anger and how you deal with all of that. There is stuff behind this, and we've got to deal with it spiritually. So I'm not just saying pray. I'm saying collaboration and in coordination and working together. Let's give some authority to some level back to parents. And I'll give us a funny and segue out of this part of it. I watched this TikTok. I talked about this on Sunday in my message. And I talked about how we have become a culture that has become so soft because of the immediacy of everything that comes at our fingertips, that we don't know how to practice delayed gratification. And there's a whole values piece about that. But I gave this illustration about this TikTok video where you see the mother that's having a conversation. And really it was a grandmother having a conversation with a 15-year-old about something she wanted her to do in the house, or something fixing the phone. And the 15-year-old popped back off at the grandmom. And then all of a sudden the video goes blank. And then all of a sudden the grandmother is leaning over and says, "There you go, boo-boo. There you go. I see you. I see you. Come on back. Come on back. Come on back. You got outside yourself for a little second. I didn't remind you, I'm from Gen X and we don't play like that. We don't talk to our adults like that." Now, some would misconstrue that to be something called child abuse. Others would view that this child is getting a healthy sense of boundaries and a healthy sense of understanding what's appropriate and what is not. And I think that has a lot to do with how a 6-year-old can climb up, find the key, get access to it, understand, like Jason said, how to hold a gun of that size with that kind of kickback. So we got exposure that's going on, that's just gone awry, desensitization that's gone on, that's gone awry, value systems that's out of whack. Spiritually, we done left the gate open. And I just got one more. You and I, we're gonna have to preach different in this season. And here's what I mean about this. In this kind of a season like this, it's not going to be so much. And you're not, I love to holler, yell, scream, squall, and give me an E flat or give me an A, and I go with the best of them. We're going to have to sit down in our congregations and have conversations, and sit down and bring in some Antons and some Albions to touch on some of the areas of how we help develop people holistically. So as much as I'm for the preach word, I'm Romans 10 all day long. How can they hear without a preacher? I'm with that every day last week. But some of our messages are going to have to be critical conversations that we have in the areas of values, in the areas of parenting, in the areas of family, so that we can get our hands around this, so that we don't have a repeat of this kind of a society. And so that's kind of where I see it in terms of how to put some teeth to dealing with some solutions.
Yeah, if you're just tuning in, we're having this conversation on every angle, the legal side, the parenting side, the spiritual side, about the 6-year-old that went into the Richneck Elementary and shot his teacher, 25-year-old Abigail Zwerner, who has been upgraded to stable condition. All of you all are very eloquent in your speech and your presentation, and I just thank God for all of you, how you talk.
And here we go.
How you enunciate so well.
Be agrinucious. Be agrinucious.
If we're going to have these conversations, Bishop, if we're going to have these conversations in our community, then we got to have the conversations that people don't want to hear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you the conversations that people don't want to hear in our community. 95%, 99% of the shootings in our cities are done by Black people. The 3 shootings in the schools, including this young 6-year-old boy, were all done by a person of color. You got to understand, the teacher was white, and ain't nobody want to talk about this race. I'm gonna talk about it here. You got a young 6-year-old boy of color that brings a gun to school and shoots a white teacher. How do you think that makes us look? How do you think that makes us look to others? This narrative that we are savages, this narrative that we don't know how to control ourselves and know how to act.
We're inherently violent. Mm-hmm.
Is only being perpetuated to the outside world that is true.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody explained to me why for so many hundreds of years, white folks did a lot to try to take us out, and now they ain't got to do nothing because we're doing it to ourselves. What kind of environments are our kids being exposed to? Where is the village? Why is it that we have left? And I know, if Marcia was here, she would be talking about the systems and the structures and all the stuff that is perpetuated. But I'm gonna say this, Bishop, when has there not been a system in America that has been oppressive to Black people? We ain't act like this. We ain't act like this. And so if we're gonna have, if there's a need to have conversation and sit down in our churches, then we need to have some uncomfortable conversations amongst us. Because I guarantee you, if this was a white kid shooting a Black teacher, we'd be marching down the street by now. We'd be at City Hall somewhere, at the police department, demanding justice. Anybody got a whole lot to say right now? When do we say we got to start holding ourselves accountable for the stuff and the mess that's going on in our communities, and stop laughing it off, and stop saying, Lord have mercy, and stop shaking our heads and start actually parenting and raising our kids and our children in environments that give them a chance to be successful in life? See, we don't want to have them conversations, do we, Tom? And you and I know you and I, we every time we raise these points, people want to shut us down. We want to hear this. You don't want to hear this side of it. You don't want to hear this side. Fox News is labeling the teacher a hero, and she is a hero. You know why she's a hero on Fox News? Because there was a white teacher saving kids from a black student.
Hello.
Ain't nobody got nothing to say about that.
Because you ain't wrong. I think the issue there is folks don't want to have. I'll do it this way. Don't be trying to tell me how to raise my kids. These my kids. I know how to raise my kids. I know what I'm doing with my kids and all that kind of stuff. And so,
yeah, and you want to come to the
narcissism, we're gonna be here.
And you want to come to the school when you call smelling like weed, and you want to blame the teacher
for
your child's disciplinary issues. You want to cuss the teacher out for the stuff you know your kid do at home, because you was with them for 2 years of COVID. You saw how they act, and now all of a sudden they get to school and you think they ain't supposed to be, and you can't understand.
You guys heard me talk about the case at skate park where a 16-year-old shot 2 kids, they were 18, 19, shot them in cold blood in broad daylight on New Year's Eve, and in front of 30 kids. And when we did a history of that kid, now, first of all, he shot them, killed them in cold blood. He stood over them and took a shotgun and shot them again when they were on the ground dying. And then he rode off on a motor scooter about a half a mile, and he saw this lady who works with intellectual disability patients. He saw her with one of her clients, and he wanted her car. And so he walked over to her with his shotgun and said, "Give me your car." And the lady was trying to talk to him all soft and nice and everything, calm and soothing. He said, "Lady, I just killed 2 people." He said, "I'm taking this car." So she was like, "Okay, can I get my purse?" And so she moved out the way. He got the car, circled back around to the crime scene because he wanted to see the disruption that he caused. By that time, the police had already been called concerning the stolen car. And so they were looking for this car because the lady said he killed 2 people. So they know that was their guy. And so they happened to come behind him because they were going to the crime scene that he was actually gazing at the time. And he noticed they were watching him. He took the police on a citywide chase and eventually crashed the car at the VA upside down. He was there. He was taken out with the shotgun in the car. And when they took him out, he said that was fun.
Mm.
And we looked at his history. And when we looked at his school record, we discovered that this kid, now 16, had been suspended every year of his academic life from first grade all the way up to the present, multiple times, every year, for cursing out teachers, for hitting teachers, for fighting other students, for being disobedient, for all types of stuff. Matter of fact, a teacher came up to me, came to court, because they wanted to make sure they told me. And they said, "Hey, I'm a former teacher, and I just wanted to let you know my colleagues and I have discussed him, and we talked about him beforehand. We knew this was coming. We knew this day was coming." That's what our teachers deal with, y'all. They deal with that. So when you ask me, Anton, what was your thoughts? I'm not surprised because I'm seeing it with the fruit manifested. Y'all looking at the budding seed. I'm looking at it once the fruit has manifested, and now they're before me. And then y'all looking at me talking about something, I don't show no mercy. You need to go kick rocks. Because I'm gonna tell you right now, you shooting up somebody, I'm gonna lock you up, because that's foolishness that you do. Don't turn your camera off, because I gotta talk about this, because that's the problem. We don't call wrong, we don't call right, and we don't call wrong. And that's the thing that me and Kevin was talking about earlier, about how when you start calling things out, and when you start calling for accountability, when you have injured and hurt other people, then all of a sudden, everybody want to make excuses. I want to hear your excuses then. Now it's time for some accountability. Now it's time for some consequences, because the time for you to get some counseling was when it was in its infancy stage, when we saw the painting on the wall. We saw it coming. We saw it escalating, but nobody wanted to do anything. We just passed it on. See, we took this mindset of see no evil, hear no evil, but evil was still present. And it don't work that way. You got to deal with the evil when you see the evil, because if you don't deal with it, it will escalate. And at some point, it's going to get beyond. Like I always tell people, sin, you can't put no boundary on sin. It's going to always spread unless you address that sin demon. And see, we're looking at stuff now and we don't want to address it. And that's the problem. We have taken accountability out of the court system and we have taken accountability out of the schools. And now we got what we got.
And if we're going to be honest about this for just a second, we're going to be honest about this. People don't want accountability when it's not their kid and when it's not their household, right? Because let it be your kid. Let that teacher have been your child. Let that teacher have been your wife. Now we want accountability for everybody.
Now we want it.
Forget it, all that other understanding and compassion and understand the trauma that the people's lives have been in. Don't nobody care about trauma if it's affecting their family. They only care about trauma when it doesn't affect them personally. So, and while I am not suggesting that trauma isn't real and it doesn't have real impact, I'm just saying we're very selective about where we apply this trauma as this beautiful swath of grace, okay? So like trauma is real and we need to address those things. But if you're defunding school counselors and school psychologists inside of the school system, and then you want to turn around and be shocked about what happens when we are not making sure that these things are invested in very real ways, when mental health issues are only a scapegoat because this person was a lone warrior inside of said crime, right? And it's funny how mental health is applied when it's certain kinds of people, but it's not applied when it's other kinds of people. But we could get into a conversation about that later. And the reality is that everybody who commits a crime, it's not a mental health issue. Some folks are just straight evil, okay? And I know y'all, some of these folks who listen to this show don't want to believe that there's spiritual factors associated with things, but evil is a very real thing that has very natural manifestations. You know, there are lots of layers associated with this, because I know when people are listening to bishops say, you know, the clergy needs to be part of this conversation, some folks are listening to that thinking, for what purpose? But if you understand the multi-dynamics associated with what a whole human is, it is mind, body, spirit, it's natural, it's physical, it's all of those things at the same time, that we're only going to be able to effectively address this issue if we're looking at this from a holistic perspective. But if we want to laser focus on one component and we pour all of our stuff into the bucket on that one component, there are so many other windows that are left open. The reality is we are dealing with a post-COVID educational system. Now, I'm not suggesting that we did not have a violence trend going on in America prior to COVID. But what I am saying is that 2 years of not being able to effectively socialize warps the mind. So like when you do not know how to do conflict resolution, when parents are just surviving by using technology as the babysitter, when children are being exposed to things that they do not have abstract thinking, they cannot process what it is that they're experiencing, when they're doing first-person shooter games, all of these things. I watch TikToks on a regular basis with 3-year-olds playing God of War and all of
Call of
these
Duty,
other shooting games, Call of Duty. And I mean, they are first-person shooters in some of these games. That means you are the person pulling the trigger. It's not your character doing it. You are the assailant. And so all of those things are changing the way that the mind processes how humans interact. So that isolation that would have been part of the normal development that was not present for 2.5 years actually retards the development of a human. So if you already had issues, you're putting steroids on already existing issues. And we are so selective about how we want to invest our dollars and cents and our time. But what you don't invest in now, you will pay for later.
Come on.
Guaranteed, every single time. And when you said it, Anton, when you're talking about you're dealing with the fruit of that, that's exactly right. Because anything that is in the root, you're going to taste it in the fruit. And if we won't deal with it in the root, because root is prevention, and people don't like to spend money on prevention because you can't measure what didn't happen. People want to wait and spend money on intervention because you could count things, but you're going to spend a whole lot more money on all the stuff you can count that if you had spent the money, you wouldn't even have anything to count. So like there are things that we are doing that is self-sabotaging on every freaking level, but we don't want to be honest about these things because it doesn't fit the agenda right now. So as long as it doesn't fit the agenda, it's not going to make it onto the front page. If it doesn't fit the agenda, it's not going to be part of the political discussion. If it doesn't fit the agenda, we're not going to invest in the real solution. We're only going to talk about the thing that moves our party agenda forward. So all of these things, we are failing these children. Because you're not going to get these babies like this without adults that have abdicated their natural responsibility to actually freaking parent someone and deal with what's really happening. And if you don't deal with it at home, like you, Anton, and I used to do all the time, whatever you don't take care of at home, you're going to end up taking care of in the streets every single time. And now those streets are your classroom, and that has no color. It touches everybody. So we either have to decide this is an us, or we're going to experience it. And one way or the other, we're going to experience this thing all together, y'all, all together. So we might as well fix it together so that we don't have to eat it together.
Yeah, I mean, you could, I wish we could end the show right there because that's it in a nutshell. And one thing that you just said, you got 3-year-olds playing God of War and Call of Duty. See, for me, that goes back to the question: what and why would any parent, any adult figure think that it's acceptable?
They think it's cute.
Mm-hmm.
Just like when little kids used to curse, and the parents be like, "Oh, that's so cute. Oh, they so cute. Listen to them. Listen to them. Listen to."
And they videotape it and they post it.
Come on, yeah. Oh, that's cute. Until they grow up and then curse them out.
Yep.
See, Swan, before we go, I want to say this too. You think about in education. This was at Richneck Elementary School. That school probably started around 7:30, maybe 8 o'clock. This shoot didn't happen until about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. This boy, he probably got up around 6. So you had that weapon on your person for about 8 hours. You walk into it because now you don't have to put your book bags in lockers. There's no lockers anymore. Your book bag is with you. So you got a weapon of mass destruction on your person. And he had enough wherewithal to know when and how he wanted to use it. For me, that's what's frightening. It's not so much, it is the end result, but that you can go through the whole day and then that's what, okay, now I'm gonna get you right now. That's scary for me. That's what's scary for me. And then also we don't want to talk about this, that a lot of these teachers, the kids got issues, they do. But as the educators, we see those triggers. We shouldn't push those triggers. But oftentimes we do. And a lot of teachers, they come in, they scared. Why you? Because I'm not scared I'm gonna get shot. I'm not. Because I treat these kids with respect. I treat them with love. I treat them with honor and dignity. A lot of you teachers sometimes mistreat these kids. So it's the home life is to blame to some point, but also us as educators got to make sure we can't just talk to these kids any kind of way because it's easy. It's easy to call them dumb. It's easy to call them stupid. You got to treat these kids with some love. That's just my personal opinion.
And let us be clear real quick that Jason is not suggesting that is the case for Abby. So I just want to be very clear that is not at all what he's suggesting. He's just talking about some experiences he's seen as an educator inside of
100%.
Right.
Go ahead,
but
Andrew.
Jason, I got a question for you. You said something that kind of stuck out. It stuck out to me. You said this kid held on to this firearm all day long until around 2 o'clock. Normally, what time do they get out of school?
They got about
depends
3.
on when they start. Yeah, it depends on what the.
But normally somewhere around 3.
Yeah.
And so my question is, do we think this kid on a Friday thought this may be my last opportunity to get her before the weekend, and also let me get her now before I go home, because he thought he was still going home?
Listen, let me tell you what, one of the things we better stop doing is assuming that these kids are stupid too. All right, because the reality is we orient to criminal behavior as if folks are idiots, but it takes a certain level of brilliance to be able to plan such devious behavior. And that's a high functioning child, guys. Like, let us not assume you got some dumb little mad kid. You don't have a dumb little mad kid. You have a strategic, brilliant mind that is warped. And the question is, what is affecting that warped status? Are we
Somebody
dealing
done
with a
left the
mental
gate open.
health issue, which could be true? Are we dealing with exposures on top of a mental health issue? Are we also dealing with, there could be a snowball effect that we're talking about here rather than it being one singular issue. But do not make the mistake of assuming that just because a kid is making bad decisions or is even just a flat out bad kid, because there are some of those, that they're a dumb kid. That is not true at all. They are
No.
often some of your highest functioning children. Some of your most intelligent children are the most difficult ones to be able to raise. All y'all have smart children at home, and you know that smart children are hard to raise because you can't just sit them somewhere and they do nothing. You got to engage, you got to be thoughtful, you got to be 2 steps ahead. These children will have you exhausted if you're raising a bright child. Exhausted.
We already know that many of the prisoners that are in our prison population right now are extremely brilliant, because we had a debate team from prison beat a Harvard debate team.
That is exactly right.
Wow.
That is exactly right. And people don't believe that.
No,
They
but
do
it's
not
true.
believe that, but it's an absolute fact. It is just misused. It's like taking 20,000 watts of energy and using it to light up a church, or taking those same 20,000 watts and using it to fry somebody in an electric chair. Same energy. It's just how you're using it, for life or for death.
On that note, y'all, I mean, as always, we get good and we got to end the show. And so at the end of the day, we want to pray for Mrs. Werner, the teacher.
For Abby's recovery, absolutely.
We even want to pray for the young boy in his future, because at 6 years old, you know, it's just amazing that could happen at that young of an age, and we want to pray for his future. And so, you know, all of us today intentionally shared a different layer of perspective of this situation, from the schools to the families, to the legal aspect, to the spiritual aspect. And what we know is that this issue is multifaceted. And what Alvin, you said it best, it's going to take all facets. It's going to take all facets in every sector to have to address this issue. And so, you know, while we were passionate about our individual perspectives, we're going to have to come together as a community to really make a difference. And so thank y'all for tuning in today. We got to run. Until next time, be blessed and be a blessing to someone else. This is Smooth 88.1 WHOV, iHeartRadio, right here, y'all, on Facebook.